Hi, this is Gertrude and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Xizt of many different teams, FNATIC and CSGO, NiP, obviously, fifflaren briefly. So Dignitas, we'll just throw that one in there. Maybe I don't think we'll talk about that one that much, but maybe at the end, we'll see where it goes. Right, Xizt, I want to go way back in time to begin this, right? Because here's the thing people will not realise maybe, is they know you from CSGO, but because I was around in CS 1.6, I want to talk a little bit about that period in time, because I actually feel like that's the player the CSGO fans don't know. So way back in the day, you weren't an in-game leader, for a start off, we can start there. You were a fragger, you were a guy trying to be a star player potentially. But way back in the day, I've got a little anecdote for you. Because oftentimes in the Swedish scene, actually, I would find out about players either, it sounds lame, but because they would make like a frag movie, like I know that guy you played with, Zippy, he did one of those. Listen, he never actually became like a pro player or whatever, but his frag movie was banging, it was like him just wrecking all the semi-pro players. And then the other way was, the cool thing in Sweden was either through dream hacks, etc., or those like semi-pro lands where people go with the pickup teams and stuff, you start to see who's actually good, even before they become a top pro. And in your case, right, I actually remember this vividly, because there's a good anecdote to it. It was at DreamHack Winter 2009, right? And you were playing in a team that no one's going to know this name. It's called Coldfrag, right? And at the time, I didn't know who the fuck Coldfrag were. But the story goes like this. First of all, there were some pretty good players in this team. Like, the Zipper guy was in there, pronax was in there. There's some people, basically, almost all the players in the team became, like, slightly better players later. But at the time, you were all basically relative unknowns, except to Swedish players. And the reason why this is a relevant story is, at this tournament, you were in a group at the DreamHack where, because they obviously seed the groups, in theory your group had MTW in it, the Danish team, and so everyone thought, right, well, they will just obviously 3-0 this group, and then gives a fuck about these teams that are in their group. And even though I will say they did have a stand-in, like Sundu was in, I think, fucking South America or something mad, and they had this Annis guy who was a stand-in from the scene. By the end of this tournament, by the way, they were in the final, they almost won the tournament, and your team did beat them actually in a best of one. And that was kind of my initial sort of introduction to you and some of the other players. It was like, wow, how was this like Swedish mix of players I haven't really heard of? Like, how have they beaten MTW? Like, do you remember this? Is it a meaningful moment early in your career? It was kind of like the first moment you got to do something against top teams, right?
Yeah, I think it was one of my first big tournaments that I went to. I was playing with pronax for a while back then. And
how old were you around then, by the way? You were pretty young, right?
Yeah, we were both the same age. So I think we went to different lands, me and pronax, different lineups, but it was mostly with Suppe and if you remember, Pop and some other old school
sure.
CS 1.6ers. But yeah, I think I remember that game. I don't think I played that good. I think we had Barbar, who's coaching now. I think he was hyped back then. I think everyone was like hyping him to be the next Swedish superstar, and I think he played really good for us back then as well. So, but yeah, that was like my real first test on LAN, I would say. One of them at least.
Because obviously, like, I want to ask about a couple of the players in this team. Like, you go way back with pronax. Again, it's funny because obviously now he actually does have kind of like a legendary rep himself from the CSGO stuff. But I always tell people the story that basically in CS 1.6, it was actually a really brutal hierarchy that there was in the scene. And famously, there was always 2 or 3 big orgs that had Swedish teams, basically. And I always used to phrase it like this. Because the system basically was like, just recruit the best player that's not in your team. It meant that all the stars funneled up to these top teams, and cArn and Robban and Valle, and these guys would get them. But then if you were, and there's an obvious group of people, pronax, threat, you basically will shit out a lock, because they're not, like, put it this way, Valor's not going to kick himself and then let fucking threat come in. Like, you basically, every single time, you're just finding the next talents and then sort of passing them up to the other guys, and you just get stuck at that spot. So it's kind of cool, actually, that pronax got to kind of like win majors in CSGO. Yeah. But back then, I wanted to know, actually, what was he like as an in-game leader? Like, was he actually a guy who was trying tactical stuff? Was he loose a guy? What was he like in the old days?
I would say he was a mix of both, playing loose and having a lot of tactics, a lot of like try hard tactics, as what he's known for from CSGO. I think I don't think he's changed that much going into CSGO as an in-game leader. He had the same style, but I think everyone in his team, including me, we had a lot to say, and everyone could have their opinion on what to do in the middle of the round. So a lot of freedom. Yeah, for sure.
Was it, like I say, because obviously he kind of actually got a bit capped, like you got to go higher than him in 1.6. Was it a bit weird, a bit surreal that basically in CSGO, like the first 3 or 4 years, just like you battling against his teams and actually you're in-game leaders?
Yeah, it was super weird. I'm really happy that he also got the chance in CSGO to play in the top teams like FNATIC and stuff like that. So I think... yeah, we were like really good friends, and then we played together for so long time, and then we just stopped playing. And I'm really happy for him that he's had a great career, obviously.
Sure, right. After this, you got your break in. I mean, it was initially Begrip, but then it became H2K. And if people don't know, Begrip was actually a classic team for what I just described before. It's like everyone who's ever good, basically, who's Swedish, just win in Begrip at one point in time. Might have been for a year, might have been for 2 weeks. And the idea is, you know, like, as a result, it's if people don't know, it's kind of like Copenhagen Flames maybe in CSGO now. Like, it's sort of like they pick up the players, and then if they're good, they go on to the next team. And so actually, if you join a team like that, you sort of know this could be my chance to break through. You know, I've sort of moved to the next level. Obviously, after the pronax period, you got to play with f0rest as your in-game leader. And this is another person, obviously, now who's very relevant. I mean, he's obviously coaching CSGO and coaching NiP even still to this day. There's another guy I wanted to ask a little bit about. What was that f0rest like as an in-game leader? Because obviously, you know, he has this rep that he's the mastermind. Is he?
I think he's a really smart in-game leader, and he's very good at micromanaging. But I think his expertise is probably coming up with strats and just like creating new strats, like those smokes on cobblestone when he was our coach, for example. Those were like his smokes. That's like a typical f0rest strat, I would say. He's just coming up with something brand new that no one has seen before. A lot of structure in his game, I would say.
And even though, listen, I mean, I'm not just trying to go down all the names here, but the other name I wanted to ask about, because he was a very infamous character, and actually, again, CSGO fans won't really know the real guy in the sense, is obviously you played with MODDII as a teammate. Yeah. Now, here's a very interesting thing I saw recently. When they republished the 1.6 stats, like, don't worry, I'm going to do a video where I sort of explain to people, like, which ones are scuffed. Like for example, I know Nico's number 2. It's like, we never fucking saw Nico in our entire lives, mate. He's playing against Balkan players. But basically, some of them, right, are scuffed. But some of them, actually, I have to say, because I never used to check stats that much, I used to just watch the game with my eyes, you know. One of the ones that really shocked me, dude, was MODDII. Like, holy fuck. Dude, cArn actually said this to me, right, at the end of 1.6. He might even have said it in an interview. He once told me that MODDII was like the best aimer he ever played with, and I was like, oh motherfucker, you're just salty about f0rest leaving, like how dare you say that. But I have to say, not only was MODDII skilled, mate, the stats are mental. Like, he actually has some of the best stats ever. What was this guy like to play with? Because people know, you know, sadly they only know like the baggage he had of like, was he a bit of like a rager or a whiner or whatever. I don't think people know how good he was at the game.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think he's probably like raw skill, he's probably one of the best, like top 3 players I've ever played with, and that's like including CSGO, I would say. I mean, I'm just talking about raw skill, like aim and stuff like this, not like the full package, but aim and everything about his aim and spray control and stuff like that was just out of the world, I would say. And he was really good at finding entry frags as well. He was really instrumental for us at the end of CS 1.6. I mean, if you think about the star players I had back then, I had MODDII, I had Gux, who was also kind of similar to MODDII, I would say, but more like the full package. And then we had f0rest. I think he had this like breakthrough year, 2010 or 11, and I think he got the offer to join MTW, but he turned down to play with us in FNATIC, and we were like, okay, we'll take it. And then we had Trace. I think Trace replaced Gux.
Yes.
But
you had some pretty sick aimers, is the point. Like, you had some of the best players, for sure.
Yeah, well, I think we also had cArn. Yeah, we had cArn for a while. Not for all the time, but... and cArn, he was like mad fragger back then as well. And yeah, insane AWPer.
Sure. Right, so okay, I wanted to ask actually briefly about the H2K period, because obviously this is what built your name up. That is the reason why when FNATIC had to part ways with Get Right and Gugs and f0rest, you were one of the names they went straight to. It was you and Delpan, obviously, were the big names they tried to build around. In the H2K team, like this is the era when, again, to explain to fans, the period before that we're talking about is pretty much like if a tournament's in Sweden, you can maybe get to play and then you might play like a good team. But it isn't the same as being a pro, and it isn't the same as traveling and going to other countries, all that jazz, right? This is the year when you start to go to, like, you can go to Russia or you can go to fucking America, or you can go to all these different places in this sense. Like, did you actually start to feel like individually you were coming into your own? Do you feel like you were becoming a star in the game?
I think me like being comfortable has a lot to do with who I'm playing with and what's the team like. I think I like took it to the next level. Each time I like upgraded team wise, I got better teammates. I started playing better and became more comfortable myself. But I would say by the time like at the end when I was playing with pronax and when we switched to threat, I would say that I was really comfortable and I felt like I'm ready to go to like a FNATIC or a SK, and that's like my goal, you know, and then to win tournaments with them, obviously.
Right, most people know the story of this IEM European Championship, the one where you were the MVP of the tournament. They maybe know your part because, like I remember, it's like the Train Deagle clip was in like every fucking movie or whatever. But most people actually build the story just around cArn because obviously the whole story was, oh, he's never going to win if all those like superstar players leave. And you know, like, listen, Delpat was very good, but like you and Peter weren't necessarily. Well, listen, you're not f0rest and Get Right, are you? So no one really thought this team had any chance to win this tournament. I always say the story that if you ever look at the semi-finals of this tournament, so it's this FNATIC team no one thinks can win. It's Na'Vi who's won everything. It's the Poles who obviously are right there. And then it's MTW, who's like another amazing team. So in theory, your team's supposed to be the least likely to win the tournament.
Yeah.
Was it actually for you a surprise to win this tournament? Did you actually really know the team was this good, that you were going to play this well?
I mean, on paper, we had not the best team, obviously. But I don't know what happened really. I think I think DSN and cArn, they did a really good job at like getting the team together as a unit. And we kind of just like became better and better game by game back then. And I remember cArn, he had some insane clutches, and I think everyone just got like fired up from these kind of moments when DSN or cArn, they did something like really, really great. And we just built on that, I think. And yeah, I mean,
keep going.
I was kind of, I don't think we played that great on practice actually before the tournament, so I wasn't expecting like that it would go this good, of course.
I want to talk a little bit about cArn, of course, because it's like a huge name that you played with. When you played with this guy, right, the problem I always had was when he did have f0rest and he did have Tentpole, Get Right, you know, some of the best players that ever come from Sweden, I always used to tell him, it's like, look, mate, we're not trying to diss you. It's just we can't tell how good your strats are because you have the absolute best players shooting people in the head at the end of them, you know, so it's always hard to know. And obviously, by the way, you can see where the theme's going to go. Obviously, people are going to say the same thing about you in CSGO, right? But my question is this, since you got to play with him in the team where he didn't have all the superstar aimers, and not only did you win this tournament out in incredible fashion, but even when the team had the slumps, at different points in the year, you would come back and be very good. Like, people know you ended the year very strong. He always likes me to bring up Thorin and DreamHack Winter, which again was another one everyone said the team wouldn't win, right? Yeah. Is there something about cArn that you can't see in the server? Like, how is he as a leader? Is there some like quality to him, or is there something about how he calls strats? Like, I'll tell you another thing I've even admitted to him is one of the reasons I used to basically be like, if it's the best IGL, in the same way as obviously I went maybe a bit overboard with existence in CSGO, is because I'm looking at it like intellectually, wow, what an incredible strat. Like, that's the most next level shit ever. But sometimes in the game, the right strat really is just let the star players go in and take this duel and win the duel, right? Sometimes it isn't about being flashy. So what was he like as a leader and an in-game leader?
I would say he was a really good leader outside of the game. He was basically our team manager and in-game leader and team captain at the same time. I think everyone just followed him. I remember one time he fucked up a veto kind of bad, and he came back and he's like, yeah, we're playing Inferno. And we're like, no, we said we're gonna first ban Inferno. How are we playing Inferno? And I don't know. He made some jokes, and we just won that game. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, I think both him and DSN, they're good at making everyone comfortable in the team, and I think that is really important for me as a new player to have those two players and persons around me, I think. Yeah.
Right. One thing I want to ask about was, I don't know how much you've ever had these conversations with him, but obviously, literally, when cArn left the team like the next year and retired, in theory, you took over, you were the in-game leader. Now, obviously, you hadn't been in-game leader before, but I got the sense, actually, because you were only in the team briefly, obviously, you went to NiP after that, but I got the sense that cArn actually saw you as kind of his protege. Like, he thought you could be like an IGL like he was, etc. Obviously, in CSGO, actually, there was some similarities. Later on, obviously, in 2018, brought you back into FNATIC, etc. Was there ever actually that kind of a vibe of like, you know, like I'm going to be like the mentor or something, or you're going to be like me as an IGL? Was there anything like that?
I mean, we have never like talked about it like that, me and him, but I mean, for sure, I looked up to him as a player and as a person. I think that was probably the main reason why I chose to go to FNATIC. I remember he called or texted me or something and asked, I have never talked to him before, and he asked like, do you want to be a part of FNATIC 2011, I think? And I like instantly said, yeah, of course. Like, I had a contract with Lions, I think, or HK, and I said, yes, I don't care about that contract. Let's go. But I think after a few days, SK or Robin like approached me and asked if I wanted to join them or try with them or something. And this was together with f0rest and GetRight. But I don't know. I really wanted to play with cArn, so I went that way instead.
Right, the story of how you get from FNATIC and this, you know, you're being groomed to be the heir of cArn, how you get from there to NiP and playing CSGO, I think actually is a story like fans don't understand, because they look back now and it seems obvious that you ended up with the best team, you have f0rest, you get right. People don't realise, first of all, you know, there's an infamous quote that everyone takes from like fucking Zonic in like 2012 where he says that, you know, CS 1.6 will always be bigger than CSGO or something. And like, you know, he basically makes it sound shit. What people don't know is that was a totally reasonable statement. Nobody knew CSGO would be a big game. Obviously, none of the TOs even promised that they'd cover the game, you know, and it started out very, very small. Like the first tournament you won was a very small one. And basically, the thing that's crazy is no one tells the story of how you left FNATIC. Because basically, once cArn retired, amazingly, this FNATIC team that, as you say, had a whole bunch of like rotating door of players, just became the best team and was winning every tournament. Even though Na'Vi was still there, the Poles were still there. These are the best teams in the world. And so the story is, even though actually, by the way, FNATIC kept winning tournaments even when you left, that's kind of crazy that you leave the team basically when it's winning. It's not like you'd lost a bunch of tournaments, you know, when you were in a slot. You left while the team was number one and you had a bunch of crazy players around you, like you said. And it's a big gamble. Like, even though, yeah, you're playing with GetRight f0rest, you're not playing with them in CS 1.6. Like, I've seen people swap games, you know, maybe they're shit. Maybe they just, like, listen, I won't hate on him, but like, Neo was never Neo from 1.6, you know, he was just a good player. Was it a gamble to you to do this move?
Yeah, it was a huge gamble, but I really enjoyed playing CSGO in the beginning, in the beta, even though it was pretty shit. I had a lot of fun. We had like a IRC channel, all the Swedish players and from 1.6 and Source, and we play like getters and stuff like that. So it was a huge gamble, but also I kind of felt like I wanted to move on. I was playing with, I think we were 2 Danish or 3 Danish players, and
sure,
only 2 Swedish. And I kind of wanted to go back to a fully Swedish lineup as well. So making the move was a huge gamble, of course, but it was also going to play with f0rest and GetRight. It's also kind of a safe call, if that makes sense.
In a way, yeah. Did you worry at all about like the game wasn't as big as CSGO and like at 1.6 and maybe it won't be? Was that concern there at all?
That was a concern for sure. But at the same time, I think 1.6 numbers were declining pretty rapidly. And a lot of teams had trouble finding sponsors and stuff like this. So, yeah, I think it was GetRight and Hidden who kind of made a move on me. And they convinced me to just to join up with them.
When this first team started, obviously everyone knows 87-0. You won all the maps in a row, and I think it was like the first 9 tournaments or something. The problem with this streak, right, is it only goes 2 ways. Either someone's heard about it and they're a fan and they think like, you know, every game was against the best team in the world and you just, like the team was gods and never even lost a round, you know, or they go the other way and they didn't watch the game and they were like, well, I'm sure everyone was just shit and no one had salaries and so it doesn't matter. I want to get like your vibe from it because you played nearly all of CSGO basically, right? Obviously, at the end of 1.6, you know, we had a scenario where there was like 3 or 4 top teams and some teams dropped out and people switched to CSGO, so the scene got a bit depleted, you know. What was it like in the early days of CSGO for you when this like streak was going on? Like, for example, do you think people overrate it? Like, was it hard at the time? Was it, how should we evaluate it? What's your feeling?
I mean, for sure, the competition wasn't as it is today, that's for sure. But we still had a lot of, or not a lot, but a few really good teams like f0rest Pro who beat us in the end.
Yes.
Our first loss on LAN. And then we had these British guys with Rattlesnake. And,
Mouse Sports briefly, I think they were.
Yeah, Mouse Sports, yeah. They were also like pretty good. And of course, the French in very games, they were like our nemesis and our top, contender for the wins. But like below these teams, it kind of fell off, and there wasn't a lot of teams that had salary back then as well. It was only a few teams. So of course, you can't really compare it to an Astralis era of today. But I think we were still kind of on a different level than everyone else. So I think that's the most impressive in my opinion.
I also think as well, the problem is, because the like idea of winning 87 maps in a row is so crazy, that's such a sexy storyline. People also, they don't understand how many maps you play at a tournament because they also think that the 87-0 streak was like 2 years long or something. They don't realise, you know, it was more like 8 months or something, I think. But I always tell them, that's like one impressive thing. But what's more impressive to me is, even when f0rest Pro beat you and like the odd team, another f0rest Pro lineup beat you, like what people don't realise is, extending beyond the streak, I think for the first year, roughly, of CSGO, I think you only lost 2 tournaments like the team ever attended. Yet you still kept winning even after that, on and on and on and on and on. So it wasn't just like, you know, that we were on the streak and momentum and all that jazz. What was it that you think that made this lineup special? Like, why was it just a team that basically, I mean, I remember another stat, which is they never ever finished below the semi-finals. It was ridiculous. Like, it's kind of like in that sense, Astralis in their era, you know, you could lose, but the other guy probably had to have the game of his life, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of our biggest strengths was that we had a player for every position. I think everyone was kind of comfortable with their roles. But I think one of the biggest strengths was me and fifflaren. We were both IGLs. I came from 1.6. I had a looser playstyle. fifflaren, he came from Source. More structure in his calling. And I wouldn't say that we were always like fighting against each other, but we always had different opinions on strats, and I think that was one of our biggest strengths as well. That we argued a lot on what's going to work and what's not. So it created a lot of like communication in between everyone, and I think that was a really good strength for us.
Along those lines, I'll just skip to make the topic fit. Basically, if people don't know, there's an interesting storyline, which is for the second CSGO major, the Katowice one, the infamous one where obviously the team unfortunately got stomped in the final. Basically, for this tournament, at this point in time, fifflaren actually briefly had taken over as the in-game leader. And not only was he the in-game leader, but he was actually even playing well individually. Like, so he was even getting some of, like, you know, the criticism was going. But because everyone only remembers the final, he got stomped. And then obviously he had that really shit scoreline where he had like 9 for 44 or whatever the fuck. But basically, he always tells the story as like, even though, like, you know, I was doing so well until the final, then because we lost the final, the team was like, let's just go back to Xizt. And he always tries to make it like, you know, that's like the fucking that butterfly effect moment where, like, if he'd have stayed as the in-game leader, maybe it would have been like a different NiP, and maybe the team wouldn't have eventually fallen off and stuff. Like, listen, obviously every player wants to believe they can do certain things and be the best and all that. What do you think of that angle? Like, was there a different world where, would it have been fine for him to be the in-game leader? Would it have been good? What's your take?
I mean, as I said, I think f0rest has said this in interviews as well. Like, if we would have kept fifflaren with us, we would have probably won more than what we did with the others that has joined. Just because we functioned really good as a team with fifflaren. So maybe if he would have stayed even as an in-game leader, we would have performed better. I mean, he was also IGLing for other tournaments, I think, a few in the beginning.
Right. Okay.
But I remember this, the major in Poland. I think we can all agree in the team that we played like our best CS during the group stages, and I think we beat Astralis. Dignitas in the semifinals as well, and they were like really good, and we just played so good that tournament up until the final where we kind of choked, I think.
One thing I want to ask along these lines then is, when you keep saying this, because it's been a theme you've repeated from some of the past teams as well. Like, again, to an outsider, right, this might not make sense. Like, when I say in 1.6 at the end, you're in the best team, and you were like, yeah, but, you know, there's like a couple of Danes there, I wanted to play with Swedes again. Then you mentioned that, like, if you play with fifflaren, it's like great environment, DSN and cArn, that's a big thing. If people don't know, that was actually a big deal in the DSN and cArn teams even before you. They always used to stress to me, like, I don't necessarily want to recruit the best player, which is a very unusual strategy. They would be like, I want someone who's like, can do his job, but also like he's a social fit, you know, so it's not awkward when you spend all the time together, you know, you have the nice atmosphere in the game where it feels good. This is clearly something in NiP that was a big deal. Like, is it just specific to these people? Is there something about Swedish culture? What would you speculate? Because famously, this is the thing that I was told as to why kind of like Michael Early had to go, is like he just kind of like, he was a bit too much of a loose cannon, you know, it was kind of fucking up the vibe a little bit, even though certainly in the server, it was a very good team. So what would you say about this angle?
I mean, for sure, you can have like a short-term success if you have a team that doesn't function that well, like socially and in the team environment. But if you want to succeed long-term, for sure, everyone needs to get along, I think. And you also need to have, like, especially if you're traveling all the time, like what we did back then, you need to get along, and you need to be able to have fun and to be able to do other stuff than just playing CS or practicing and stuff like that. I think it's really important, yeah.
Right, now we're going to get into some fun stuff, because basically, again, if people only know like last 3 or 4 years of CSGO, they're going to have a really different perspective on who Xizt was at the beginning of CSGO. Because one thing that was quite cool was, even though, as I said, unfortunately, because I think it's 2 factors. One is that you did have Get Right and f0rest, and they obviously statistically were just killing everyone in the server. So you kind of got that like cArn criticism I said before, which is like, even when you win, people are like, yeah, but are you actually that good? So I'm fucking winning the tournament. What more do you want? And then the other angle, like I say, was just like cArn had, one of your rivals in existence was doing, in theory, like all these beautiful smokes and flashes or whatever. So even if he didn't win, so he got the credit for like, he's better. So again, it's one of those scenarios. I want to ask this question quickly, which is like, do you think in theory, does the in-game leader that win, did he do the better job? Or do you actually think it's possible that is it possible to call like a perfect half and lose and you were still the better one? What's your take on that one? I've always wondered.
I mean, you can call a perfect half, and you can have the best strats, but in the end, if someone makes like a small detail, or he kills three guys when you're going to execute through a smoke, it doesn't matter what kind of strat you have. I think you need to have both. You need to have really good players. You need to get along. It's like small details, like after plant positions and making everyone needs to make a good decision in the round. It doesn't just come down to one guy making a 6 strat, I think. So, yeah.
One thing I've always thought is kind of bullshit is when people take the fragging, and it's like, listen, they can say it, like I said about cArn. Maybe it makes it easier to call a strat if you've got f0rest. But the part I feel like is really misunderstood is a lot of fans think the superstar players understand the game like the in-game leaders. And so one thing they might be naive about, right, is they might think if you have f0rest and GeT_RiGhT with a very defined playing style, they just kind of do their thing and then you call around it. Like, whereas I wanted to ask you this, right? I know that, for example, I know it might sound shocking because he's a really cool guy on camera. GeT_RiGhT can be a bit of a whiner sometimes. He can definitely bait a bit sometimes. I've heard teammates say that. f0rest can sometimes be a bit lackluster or needs a sort of a kick up the arse, or in fact, quite frankly, he'll even say it. He never tries to think like an IGL and watch the demo. He wants you to tell him where to go. How do you use superstar players like this to get the most out of them, do you think?
I think the trickiest part about having superstars is like sometimes they're going to have their off days, or sometimes you're going to have to change stuff. And changing how a superstar is used to play the game is really hard. Like getting them to learn new stuff, it just doesn't work, I think. It's really hard to do that. I think that's probably the biggest weakness.
Right, there's a stat that people might not know, which is that in 2013, when they did the top 20 players of the year, you were on the list, right? But the problem is a fan's going to think, wait a minute, yeah, but you had GeT_RiGhT, what were you, like 20th or something? You were 6th on the list, right? And here's the thing. I won't debate what number you were, whether that was right or wrong, but I will say this is where the question's leading. What people don't know about NiP is everyone remembers GeT_RiGhT and f0rest were amazing, and everyone remembers fifflaren never had great stats, right? But while some people sort of remember, well, Freiburg did have some like monster games that, dude, they never actually mentioned that you were fragging people. Like, you had really good fragging stats back then, especially if you're the in-game leader as well, and on a team where, you know, it's not like there's a million kills to go around. And in fact, I even went back and double-checked this. Even in sort of the years later when the team fell off, your fragging's still really good. Now, it's true, if people go on the pure like HLTV rating, actually the rating's not that good. But it's the sort of thing where that can't take into account the role you play in the team. Like the actual like kills numbers per round are very high. Even into like parts of 2017, you're having 2 or 3 months or a few tournaments where you still have good fraggers. So as an in-game leader, how did you envision yourself as a leader? Because obviously a lot of the leaders, especially in CSGO, actually, I noticed, they almost like listen to the fan thing of like, well, an in-game leader's just a brain in the game and doesn't frag. And it's like they just kind of like sacrifice everything, just give everything up and almost like admit like, yeah, I'm going to be shit, but you know, I'm just going to try and make the star player like 10% better or something. You were like an IGL that was winning, obviously was calling well, and you were fragging. So what was this element like? How were you able to do it? Because so few players have ever done this, mate.
I think when I was playing good, I was, or how do I phrase this? I think I based my calling around my own skill as well. Like I was comfortable just rushing out somewhere with a flash. I was comfortable knowing that I would make this enter frag, let's say. I was making a lot of plays to make our strats work, like surrounding my own skill. And I kind of felt like towards the end, like when my own my own performance was going down, like my calling was going down as well. And I think it goes hand in hand with me.
Right, there's a concept. I won't give like an American sports one there because I know you're Swedish. So even if you use hockey or soccer or a sport like this, there are players where even though these are like athletic sports and if you're fast and you're big, in theory you have advantages, there are amazing players who can play till they're like 40 years old because, you know, what they do basically is they learn how to play the game and master it. So you don't even have to be the fastest. You don't even have to be the one who can kick, you know, it's like old man game. You know how to position, how to control the game, maybe how to pace yourself and stuff. And one thing I thought was interesting about your career is when the fragging did drop off, it just revealed that even at the end, when people thought mechanically you weren't that good, you were always clutch. Like, and there's another thing that's underrated, right? People think all the star players win the clutches. Nah, some star players are just okay in clutches. You know, sometimes, as people know with Xyp9x, sometimes it's the player that you wouldn't expect who wins all the clutches. Is this something you were always aware was a skill of yours? Like, what does it come from? Because it's got to be something about mentality, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's mentality, it's experience. But I kind of noticed that in the beginning of my career as well, and people kept telling me, like, especially when I had, I think it was Threat and, you know, this mixed team aimbot that we had with Crystal, Threat, QP, and Benton, and some other players. Always when I had like 1 HP or 5 HP, I was very low on HP, I suddenly just played much better because I just became like super focused just focus on my own. I don't have to focus on anything else, just my own screen and my own movements. And I think every time I came into a clutch situation, just something clicked in my brain, and I just knew instantly what I had to do.
I'll tie. Oh, yeah, keep going.
I didn't think so much in my clutches. Everything just came naturally.
One thing I want to ask about just on this exact topic is I once heard a really cool story from some teammates of Coldzera's when he was like at his prime in the Brazilian team. And it sounds like some out of a movie, mate. Basically, when f0rest was in a clutch against another player I won't name, apparently Coldzera on the mic when everyone else is dead just said to f0rest, who was in like a 1v1, like trying to figure out like, should I peek now? Is the guy going to rush me when I plant the bomb? Coldzera apparently just said like, noobs always push. And what he meant by that was, like, basically, if Coldzera himself was in a clutch, he sort of had a mentality of, like, he's going to make a mistake and I'm just going to exploit it. It's like a real confidence level that's very, very high. So I wanted to ask something like that. Even in the latter days of your career, you always seemed when you're in the clutches, like you believed you were going to win them. Like the other guy's going to fuck up, or you tap the bomb at the right time and bait him out. Like, is there, in those scenarios, like, are you cocky? Do you actually think other people aren't that good in clutches? Like I've always said, like there's not many players actually are clutch in the game. Some players, it's just if they hit the shot, they hit the shot. They don't always think tactically. Some people just do the obvious things. What would you say on that angle?
Yeah, I mean, when you get into a clutch, you need to play cocky. You need to take gambles, and you need to believe in yourself. Just take this the famous clutch from nothing. I think is a perfect example. When on overpass, I think it was in Brazil, when he takes his knife up and he's just walking with his knife like for 60 seconds. He's not afraid that he's gonna meet the guy with the knife up. I think you need to have that mentality that you don't care really what's gonna happen. You need to play cocky. You need to kind of not make fun of the opponent, but you need to control the moment, I would say.
Yeah, sure. Put pressure on him, something like that. Yeah. What about this then? I'm not going to, if people notice, I'm trying to sort of talk about things you haven't talked about in other interviews, not just trying to go on the obvious topics. So even though NiP won a million tournaments, I'm not going to talk about all of them. I want to ask about this particular era. When the majors finally came around, and obviously, even though technically, like Very Games had just overtaken you in the rankings, and it was always competitive during these first majors, just because you were the team that had won a million tournaments, everyone was waiting for when's NiP going to win a major, and you kept having all these scenarios where you kept making the final over and over again, obviously. And you only managed to win one. And I always tell people this story. It's weird how the game works sometimes in Counter-Strike. Because in all the ones that you were supposed to win, the other team wins, whatever, or they slightly edge you. The one that you won, ESL One Cologne, would you also agree? This is the one you kind of weren't supposed to win, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think we started the tournament really bad. And even like before the tournament, I think we had some bad tournaments. Where I don't remember, but if we lost like in the groups or something, or the first playoff game before this tournament. So going into that tournament, we played really bad. And I think Cobble was just introduced for this major. And first game we played Cobble against Xizt team, I think.
Yep.
And they just smash us like 16-6 or something like that. We didn't have a chance. So I think after this game, I think everyone is so like, oh, if playing NiP, we're just going to pick Cobblestone. They have no idea how to play this map. But game by game, we just, again grew as a team, and we played Cobble every game, I think, and we managed to win all of them, especially also in the final. I think FNATIC, they picked Cobblestone against us, which was really surprising because I don't think they were especially good on it, but I think they just like thought, hey, NiP, they've been struggling on this map, let's just pick it.
Right. Obviously, if people go to your Twitter, your actual profile picture is winning ESL One Cologne. So it's obviously a special moment for you that you care about. Listen, I don't know where you come from because you seem like a pretty even-keeled guy, but I'll ask the question because it's a fun one. when someone wins a tournament like that, like it's not like you were the best team. It's not like you're dominant. It's not like, as you say, you even know that this map we're going to win or we have all the strats for it. Do you believe in, or there's almost a feeling of like destiny? Like it's just supposed to happen?
I mean, I think that's just how CS works. Anyone can win against anyone on a given day, you know. I don't think we played like great CS even that tournament. We had a lot of 16-14 wins and I think a few overtimes as well. So I guess destiny had it in for us to win this tournament somehow.
Right, obviously a famous detail. This is why, actually, by the way, everyone who's watching this interview doesn't even believe this interview ever took place. Because the era when NiP was starting to slightly go down was when I started doing all the analyst desks. I was in the unfortunate position, which, listen, it's fun, but it also sucks. Because to be the villain, right, what you have to really do is, I never ever lied, but you have to sometimes say the thing that's awkward to say that no one really wants to say. Like, I'll give you an example, right? No one really wants anyone to say right now, Olaf Meister's not very good anymore because he's a legendary player, you know, and he's a really cool guy. But if I'm the analyst and every other one is just talking about like 5 years ago, I might have to be the guy who's like, he's actually not the best. He's probably the worst player in the server sometimes, you know, it's just the reality. So when NiP started to go down, obviously one of the details I would always bring up was, as an analyst, if I was looking at the win rates and who's supposed to be the best, it looked like you were doing some really weird vetoes in NiP. And obviously everyone knows this was kind of even built into your personality. There's a famous, like, never pick cash against me, motherfucker clip or whatever, which, listen, builds into the idea that, you know, like, you're the god of the veto. You just pick whatever the fuck map you want. Now, what I want to ask was this. I know NiP as a team, generally, like, this is actually the era when I probably had the worst relationship with Get Right I've had in my career, because I know he thought I was, like, hating on NiP. It was like, oh, why are you saying, like, you know, Envious should beat us, or FNATIC? And my view was sort of like, well, they do, but okay. What I want to ask was this. Was NiP still like amazing in practice or something? Were the players just stuck in the past, like you felt like you should still be the best or you deserve to be the best? Does this play into how the vetoes were done? Like, for example, obviously I can't know what scrims are like. Like, maybe in scrims you win every Dust 2 game, and so it makes sense to pick it against Envious or something, you know. But to me, as an outsider, Envious is the best team in the world on Dust 2. Where do you come down on this topic?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that you have to go through when you do the video. I think an issue with us that we had for a long time, even towards like the end, that we were really good in practice and we couldn't really translate our practice results into the tournaments most of the times. Sometimes we would get like I wouldn't say like a fluke win, but we were still winning tournaments. But it just didn't happen as much as before, obviously. But I mean, I think we had a really bad map pool as a team as well. So doing a good veto was very hard, I think, back then when we were struggling a lot. But also, like, I wouldn't say that the veto came down to me all the time as well, because I can't.
Was it a democratic team in that sense?
Yeah, I can't speak for all the teams, but especially I think it's Swedish teams. Everything has to be very democratic. Everyone has to have their opinion, and I think it was at this time that coaches really became a thing in CSGO. Yes. And I think all the coaches that I've had, I think they had more to say regarding the vetoes. I think maybe dating all the way back to 15 or 16 when Threat joined. So, of course, I mean, I don't think it's bad when people say like, oh, Xizt did a bad veto here. But, I mean, what people need to understand is that maybe I didn't do the veto all the time. It was mostly coaches or the team decision, or someone felt like someone in my team didn't feel comfortable on a certain map, and then I don't want to pick that map. There's a lot of factors, but yeah.
I think you touched on a part I actually want to ask about there, which is another detail that, as an observer, I'm not in the team. I don't know the vibe, that, so I can never know this. Like, a classic example would be sometimes in a veto, on paper, maybe you have a map that you just play if it's the third map or something, and you might have a very good win rate on it. Maybe you have 70% win rate, and then the team you're playing has, like, let's say a 30% win rate on it. So as an analyst, the logical thing is like, right, you do a punish pick here, that's your map pick, you're going to, like, get an edge in the veto. But as you're saying, one of the things, and I feel like with what you've said about your team, it must apply to NiP. Another factor that pro players have, especially sometimes even great players, is they don't like maps that they might even win on, but they just don't feel like I totally know how to play this map, or maybe my spot, I'm a bit off, or I don't feel comfortable on it even. I've even seen teams have amazing win rates and not pick the map. So was there an element of this in NiP? Like, listen, even if they're supposed to be getting us on cash, for example, maybe we like cash, maybe we fuck with the vibe, everyone's got their CT spot or something.
I mean, as I was touching on before, like changing how a superstar wants to play is really hard. So I think that applied to our team in general as well. I think Threat, he also touched upon that in some interview, like trying to change us when he joined was really hard. It's much easier to work with new players. It was just really hard for us to change stuff in general, I would say, and like change how we work as a team, and like to change our map pool. Like, for example, I don't think we ever felt comfortable on Mirage, and that is one of the most popular maps. So
yes,
yeah, it was really hard.
Are you someone, when Threat came along, because there's a detail people don't know, which is the year he came along was the year where famously the coach can talk all the time on the mic during the game. And obviously, famously, there were teams like Starix and Na'Vi was probably the most famous one. Even Peacemaker was in Team Liquid for a while. There were teams where essentially these guys were the in-game leader, even though they're not sort of in the game. Like, people get what I mean by that. They call the game essentially, and then the other players just play it. In fact, famously, people even thought, I think this is why Valve kicked it, unfortunately, that had just become Counter-Strike. It'd be like a guy outside the game, probably like an existence God B type guy, and then it'd just be aimers in the game who were like his StarCraft pieces. He's moving around the map, as it were, right? In your team, when Threat came in, was he actually calling? Did you still call? Like, what? Do you remember how that device worked in that sense?
Yeah, he was calling in the beginning. I think it was in Columbus where Valve, they took everyone into a meeting, I think, and they were like, "Hey, this is the new rules. We're not going to allow coaches to talk during the game, and we're gonna ban coaches." Basically, they said something in those lines. And at the time, Threat, he was calling in practice, and I think a few events, or maybe it was only one. I think it was DreamHack Masters Malmö where he was calling. As for me, it was really nice having someone who's micromanaging from the spectator position. I think it was really, really like overpowered in a sense. You can just click between all the players and you're gonna call like a god, basically. But for me, it was really nice just playing as a player again, making him do all the calls. And then going into the Columbus major, even Pith, he couldn't go with us because of some visa bullshit. And then Threat had to play, and he was also calling, I think, when he was playing there.
One question I had is, because you can never know when you're a journalist, like you're looking for the story and how does it tie into things to make, like, essentially you almost make like the movie version in your head, like you're making it interesting for the fans. They don't always know stuff about tactics, right? There's an infamous story about this Malmö tournament that you won, which was like an amazing win. It was out of nowhere. Again, nobody thought NiP was going to win this tournament. It was on Swedish soil. There's a story about what Threat supposedly changed in the team that I thought was very interesting, but I don't know how much it's, exaggerates. I want to ask you about it. Basically, at the time, NiP famously, if people don't know, when you started to go down, you were infamous for always losing against the Force spies, right? The French would do it, or FNATIC would do it, and you'd have the guns, and it's like, right, you're supposed to get back in the game, but then, someone comes around with the CZ or does some bullshit SMG move. And famously, he supposedly implemented some protocols that I think you were the only team in the game that understood this concept, which is he basically said, when you're in a scenario where they have like one or two guns, but their economy is actually bad, don't always like hunt them, don't always push. Like if they want to actually save, let them do it, because since at the time loads of teams would force buy if they could force around like 2 guns or like a Galil and SMG, he basically figured out that he could sort of make them like break their own economy and they would just have like a weaker buy. Is this real? Did he actually, is this like a legit thing he explained to you guys? It seemed to work.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that we were talking about a lot, especially when Threat came in. I think it had more to do like with our own economy. Let's just focus on ourselves. Let them say we don't really care.
Right.
We want a big and we want good economy ourselves. Let's not focus so much on them. But regarding that, if they save like 2 or 3 guns, they will most likely drop like a FAMAS or even M4 if they have money for it next round. They're gonna have a pretty scuffed buy.
Yes.
It's a legit strat for sure, and that strat help us with, yeah.
Right, this is obviously the era when, as you say, the team wasn't the best anymore, but these wins would just come out of nowhere. Like, I always joke with Get Right. Like, he was so mad at me when I said Nip Magic at the beginning. And by the end, everyone had, like, fucking T-shirts on in Nip. They're like, yeah, we love Nip Magic. Because in a way, once you realise you're not the best anymore, it's kind of cool that you can still win a tournament, you know. I always say there's lots of teams that have been, like, you know, number 6 in the ranking, and sorry, they just will lose to every team that's in the top 5, and they'll just finish, like, you know, 5th, 8th in the tournament. Like, they kind of know where they're at. What was this era like? Because obviously you were one of the players, I think, with the clutch factor that certainly had some of the Nip Magic, you know, coming through in big games. Eventually, do you think it was a real thing? Was there kind of a vibe of like at certain tournaments, like we are just like sort of back, like we can win this one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we went into every tournament thinking or knowing that we can win this for sure. It didn't always go our way, and we struggled a lot, but sometimes it just clicked, and it's kind of the same situation that I said with cArn and ESL. Like someone made a great round, like a great clutch. Everyone is like takes that energy and to the next round, and then we just like grew more as a team during those kind of tournaments. I think it kind of played into the opponents' heads as well. Like
right.
this is NiP. They're still really good, and they're still really clutch, and they can still win tournaments. So I think that played into their heads, and maybe sometimes they choked. I think a good example maybe is against FaZe in Oakland.
Oh, classic one, yeah. They were supposed to win, obviously it was a best of 5.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I don't think we played really good back then. I think it was probably one of the worst times in NiP history, especially the second one after Freiburg left the team. But yeah, we still knew that we were clutch and that we had a potential to win tournaments. We just struggled a lot with inconsistency.
Right, when you were in these situations where the teams like winning miracle ones, etc. As you say, I actually think that was a factor. Like there was almost an element where the other team would be like, "Oh shit, it's this Nip." Like I thought it's not the one from the last 3 tournaments or practice or whatever. Like wow, this is an interesting detail I want to ask about because I've noticed team dynamics can be very different in that sense. Like, for example, if people don't know, some of Get Right and cArn and some of these people, in 1.6, they had the opposite problem. They used to always lose to like the Polish team all the time, and they would lose in the same fashion. You know, it would always be like super close, and then some bullshit round happens, and you could always think like, can we just never beat this team? Is this the one team that beats us? Right? Obviously, in your team, they had the dominant period where they had the 87-0 and all the wins. And I always thought in that example, like Very Games was good enough to win some of the tournaments. It's just they were so mind-fucked when they played it because if people don't remember, they never used to even win a map. So they couldn't even feel like, you know, we're not even in the series. And then obviously later on with the Nip Magic angle, yeah, as you say, there would just be times where the number 1 team in the world, they just start playing like 20% worse. You guys go 20% up and suddenly you can beat them. What do you think is the psychological element of this? Like, I feel like a lot of even top pros maybe don't think about this. Like, I know a lot of I'll give you an example. The Astralis players, before they started winning, if you ever brought this up with them, they thought it was just like, you know, some fucking like storyline bullshit. They were like, nah, I just had an off game, or, you know, like, I'll get them next time, or, you know, we picked the wrong map. You know, they would have like every excuse. Do you think it's real, the psychological element? Like, you know, the idea of sort of winning the mind game?
For sure. I think it's the same like in clutches. You need to win the psychological battle against your opponents. I think because you touched upon Envious, and I think they had our number really bad. I think we lost so many finals against them when we played Alu 2015.
Yeah, 15.
Something like that. I don't know. I mean, in practice and against other opponents, we played so much better. But when we played against them, we didn't have any chance. I mean, Happy was like killing guys through smokes all the time, and then MBK was clutching, and we were struggling against them. And I think that's maybe how different other teams felt against us.
Sure.
So yeah, it's a big mental. There can be mental issues for sure in CSGO.
I'm sure one of the sad regrets in NiP was that, as I said, you were in all these finals at the beginning, the first 5 finals, including winning one, and most of them you actually had a chance to win, or you were really close to winning. And then after that, even though there was the NiP Magic, you win Malmo, you win the Auckland, you win a bunch of tournaments every now and then. The majors, though, obviously people know, just dropped off completely. Like you never were that relevant, or the nightmare period was when there was a couple you just didn't even qualify to, obviously. In this particular era, was that hard to handle? Is it difficult to be a pro and to practice all this time and then go to the major where, everyone in theory, it's at the time especially, they were the biggest tournaments in the world, and then not get another chance to win one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we had so much pressure on us back then, not only from ourselves as a team, but like from sponsors, from you guys, all the journalists.
Of course.
But it was... I mean, it's a part of the game. If you want to be one of the big dogs, you need to handle the pressure. And in the end, we couldn't do it. Especially at the majors, when it came down to like the online qualifiers and stuff like that, we just like, I mean, you couldn't recognize us, and the tension in the room when we were playing and we were losing, it was one of the worst moments of my career for sure. Yeah.
Was there when all, as you say, like when there was like scrutiny, not just from fans but from obviously media analysts, I won't say other teams, actually they sent to respect, I still noticed at this point in time, when this happens, right, as I alluded to with Get Right in the NiP Magic thing, there were a couple of players in NiP, Get Right in Freiburg mainly, they would get mad salty if anyone like predicted against or said NiP's falling off or whatever, because that's just their personality. I know f0rest is like, he's like a hippie, he just doesn't give a fuck seemingly. Did you ever care? You seemed like you didn't from the outside, like you still sort of maintained whatever you were thinking. Did you ever care that people underrated NiP or said you're going to lose and then you win?
Not really. I mean, I think it was kind of good for us that people started underestimating us and like talking us down, because I think that just relieved a lot of pressure on my players, and it kind of gave like, I think Freiburg is a great example. I think it gave him a lot of hunger to just practice more, and I think in some sense it just made us better, I think.
Obviously, NiP, people will know there's 2 angles to this. One is the famous one that when fifflaren was kicked, which actually, as it later came out, was actually officially by the org. It wasn't even the players. Like, they just told you guys, yeah, fifflaren's kicked after this tournament, which is pretty fucking wild. Yeah. But basically, there was a famous scenario where it was like the rotating door of the 5th player. And the joke is, like, I mean, the obvious, like, meme people would know now is it's like that fucking thing where, like, that the Master of Dark Arts at Hogwarts or whatever, like, keeps getting killed over and over again in Harry Potter or some shit, right? Whoever's the 5th player, like, they join, it looks good initially, and then, like, they tank eventually their stats, and if NiP doesn't win, they're like, right, you're fired. Right? When this happens, right, the problem is, I also know this was a very famous thing that happened in Swedish Counter-Strike, even in 1.6. As you said, superstar players don't tend to want to change. And so it doesn't have to be Get Right f0rest. It could be Old School, it could be Heaton and Porty, it could be any of the great players, right? What tends to happen is, even if they're actually not as good at their position anymore, and the new guy who's coming in could be amazing and they could swap up, they tend to sort of be like, right, well, I play Opera on Nuke, and he plays Ramp, and basically there's just one spot left, and even if that guy's never played that spot, it's like, bad luck, you're new guy, you're playing that spot. Was NiP actually like this? Because from the outside, obviously people speculated that, like, like the last player sort of, he has to eat all the shit basically, and then that's why you keep having a swap. Was there any of that going on?
I mean, after fifflaren got kicked, they told us, like, they didn't tell us instantly who we were getting. So I started looking for like options, after they told us. And I was looking into Twist a lot because I think he was the obvious choice for us, and he was playing really good with his team. I think he was playing in Lemon Dogs or something like that back then.
Sure.
So I was kind of focused on getting Twist, And then like the day after or something like that, they told us like, yeah, we're getting Michael, and we have already signed him, basically. And we're like, what? I don't think there was any problems with Michael, really. It was just in the back of our heads all the time, like we didn't make the decision, and I think all of us really wanted to play with Twist, but then they kind of forced us upon Michael, and as I said, there was nothing wrong with him, and I think that was the main reason why we kicked him after so short time, was basically because we thought that it could have been better with the Twist maybe. Or we wanted to try that angle.
This video was kindly supported by Chris with a K, Lager15, Matt Pugnatio Racula, cArn, Travis Goff, Zach Smid, Adam Oakes, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Chris, Eric Hillerstad, Hades, J Dobbs, Jensen Go, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsberg, Kovacevic, Tobias Bernasconi, Zumba, Zyrathenia, and special thanks go out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs? Do you want teasers? Who's going to be the guests on my next interviews? Do you want to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.